he is burning, hoped to obtain the plant of birth. For though he was a pious, God-fearing king who practiced the divine cult faithfully and assiduously, he was cursed with stupidity and had no one to carry on with his name. According to the myth, he is born to heaven by an eagle, whom he had rescued from a pit where it had been cast by a serpent whose friend it had betrayed and whose nest it had devoured. The Inanna myth was popular among the seal cutters, to judge from several seals depicting a mortal climbing toward heaven on the wings of an eagle. The third Akkadian myth, in which a mortal plays a significant role, revolves about a sage named Atrahasis, and his repeated efforts to save humankind from destruction at the hands of the gods, angered by man's chronic depravity and evil doing. Unfortunately, only a few fragmentary passages of the composition, initially 1,245 lines, are preserved. From there, we gather that the gods, disturbed and depressed by the clamour of humanity, sent famine, plagues, pestilence, and disease against it, so that people were reduced to cannibalism and self-destruction. Again and again, Atrahasis pleads with the god E to intercede, and humankind is saved, only to multiply once again and become noisy, rebellious, and clamorous. One of the decimating inflictions sent against man by the gods, according to this myth, is the flood, and in this case, man is saved when Atrahasis, on the advice of E, builds himself a big boat and boards it with his wife, family, and artisans, his grain, goods, and possessions, as well as the beasts of the field, as many as eat herbs. All this sounds like just another version of the well-known and not too different Sumerian, Akkadian, and biblical flood stories, in which the hero's name, however, is not Atrahasis, Zeusudra, Utanapishtim, and Noah. Finally, there is a myth concerned with humankind's trials and tribulations of humankind, particularly the Akkadians. Though it ends on a note of hope and salvation, however, it is not a mortal but a god who acts as the saviour of mankind. This myth, which is not readily accessible to the layman, will be treated here in considerable detail, since it is noteworthy in several respects. Its diction is highly poetic. Some of its ideas and expressions seem to have biblical echoes. It ends with an unusual epilogue which illuminates, to some extent, the literary practices and conventions of the ancient myth writers. The two central protagonists of the myth are Ira, the god of pestilence, and his vizier and constant companion Isham, the god of fire. Following a description of Ira as the fearful slaughterer who always wastes the plain and who takes joyous delight in devastating the land, the story begins with Ira lying lazily about, uncertain of what is a cruel and destructive deed to perform next. At this point, Sibi, his strange and unnatural seven-bodied weapon, whose breath is death and which inspires all with dread and terror, speaks up to the signatory Ira in bitter anger.